in here, so.
Oh!
Okay, here we go.
Return, let's see, today is 7:20. Okay, well, happy meeting. Good to see you all.
How do you,
It's here.
organize your
Okay,
pictures?
excuse me.
Or
Hi.
keep track of
Game's
them?
all
I
here.
have a program that came with it.
Do you? Could be-
I don't remember what it's called.
You
I actually
have
have 3 of
I'm
them.
gonna have.
What kind of computer do you use?
I love
It's
it.
a Dell.
Adele, okay, so it's a Windows
An
machine.
outside,
In between
outside
meetings.
company, and I was helping
So do
advising
you
a private
put
equity group
keywords in for
on
each
this
of them?
company.
Yeah,
and
you can group them
so
by
they're kind of taking a
keyword
break
and
and
by
talking about.
location.
You can
Yeah,
tag
I
them
told
with
them
things and then
Yeah.
you can search on that,
You'll
right?
find them by the face.
Well, why don't you,
But, you know, I could do
Somewhere I read that a
so I can do whatever
photographer,
we do in the normal.
Okay.
work.
professional
okay,
photographers
thank you,
said,
Tom.
of course, professional photographers
No, you,
had to shoot,
there's no right,
you know,
there's no wrong
500
end, and there's no
photos.
right end.
Put the
Right,
arching
and
down.
so they'll shoot
Oh, they-
10 things of the exact same scene, just
Yeah.
and pick one, right? But they said that, so like amateur photographers, they said you probably have several hundred, if not several thousand photos. And they said what you should do is, because people agonize over should I keep this, it's, you know, not the best, but I really like the photo, I wish it was a better, you know. And they said, keep all of them, but do go through and process them and pick out, you know, so if you have 5,000, pick out 500 of the really best, you know, and so then when you display them or you share them with people or whatever, you know, you're not going on and people are like, yeah, you know, but then you have the other 4,500. If and when, you know, once in
Up in
5
the closet,
years,
you can put 'em up
yeah,
in the
once in
closet
5 years you think, oh,
Whenever it's
I got
empty.
that photo of Dick Goers bending over doing this, you know.
Is that what it is? Yeah. So. Okay, are you happy with that answer?
Boy, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
sloppy.
really prepared. Already on the building here.
Actually, one
What
thought,
building?
I actually do have a comment to make on relevant to this, was that,
Where we're gonna put the,
because Pastor Katie mentioned this last week, so Tom, you weren't here. She said something about, you know, it is within our right to ask the council for a strategic plan. Now, I don't know whether she meant a plan, suggesting that maybe one doesn't exist, and they should be tasked to do that. Frankly, I thought there actually was a strategic plan, maybe it's a little dated. But
Good question.
it did occur to me that we should, because I'm not sure,
I
the
don't know.
more I
last
thought
time-
about it, is I
last
don't
time
know
was-
how to think about, particularly the whole question of use of space.
Right, so if we're gonna
Without
do
some
something-
sense for
yeah, if we're gonna
what
do something
is.
differently, what, you know, what's the plan?
Yeah, because otherwise I'm thinking backwards about what we've done,
Yeah.
and that may or may not be.
Well, there, I did in my file somewhere, I did bring something that was prepared. The closest thing to a strategic plan that I think anybody found was with something that Pastor Pangborn did. It was multi-pages, but when you read it, it's more tactical than strategic. It's a lot of things
Yeah.
to do as
Yeah,
opposed to a
as
strategic.
opposed to where you're headed.
Right.
But you had done some stuff on an engaged church, I
Yeah.
remember that,
Yeah.
which isn't that's not necessarily a strategic plan, but
No, but
it
it's.
could find its way into, elements could find
It
its
could,
way.
and I think, you know, what
I
businesses
took
do is,
college
they have
courses.
a strategic plan that usually goes out 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, not many.
And every year they review it,
You know,
so they
actual
update
drawing
it, but it isn't that they say,
yeah.
oh, let's start with a new strategy over here, they almost never.
Well, so my point that I wanted to bring up
Didn't you do the
is,
Palmer method?
it would be terrific if we had one that was fresh within the last 6 months, all buttoned down and everything, that would be great.
Yeah.
But
You just forgot.
that was
We don't-
probably not an expectation.
No, we don't have
So
that.
we should, I at least think we should assemble whatever documents we do have. And either they will be sufficient to help inform us, or they will be so
Yeah. We'll look at them
woefully
and say,
inadequate, we'll either say, well, we either gotta plunge on without it, or we'll say, you know what? We may have to drag this out a little bit and commission some kind of strategic planning work, and the downside may be it moves this out, you know, a quarter or
Well,
something.
which I think is.
But I think we should just
Katie
be
was talking about
purposeful
that from
about
the standpoint of, you know, kind of a recheck of the mission, vision, everything else, and as you do that, the next piece after that is the strategy. So you still wanna know sort of what your purpose is and where you're going, then you say, okay, strategy is a set of choices of, well, then how are we going
Did
to
you ever see
do that
that
over a
micro
period of
printing
time?
on a
How
check?
to guide you.
But I'm sure
We
there
talked
are
about that.
some kind of
You know where you
documents
sign your name on a
that would
check?
be relevant,
You
even
look
if
at the
they're
line
somewhat
of it, it's
dated,
words.
that we ought to just,
Yeah.
Some are words.
we ought to
Well,
just
you're-
get in our
Right.
heads.
Yeah, you're a guy from
What does it
Cincinnati?
say?
No.
Have a nice
Oh, that was,
day.
yeah, that was a long time
There's
ago,
a-
but that was,
Something about
that was
This is a
in the
valid
Pangborn.
signature or
Days.
something.
Days, yeah.
Remember that?
Right,
Yeah.
so this
So-
must be.
Oh, no, I was vice
This
president.
must be
Yeah,
a
so-
valid
so, I
signature,
mean,
and we
something
explain
to do with it.
everything.
Yeah,
yeah, I think it had a lot of good thinking and there was a lot of discussion. That was oriented more towards how do you deal with growth, because we were experiencing growth and we wanted to grow more. And I think, you know, the reality is that there aren't many churches that are literally growing in numbers, but they are growing in depth of what they do and everything else, and sense of purpose. So instead of it being, it used to be gathering place where we just want to gather a lot of people, and the statistics they measured were the kinds of things that don't actually tie to engagement and people,
Yeah.
you know, living a purposeful life and all that stuff. And so, I think it's going to require us to do kind of a rethink of the whole thing. I don't know, maybe Katie knows where there might be some. Tom, do you have an extra copy of the schematic there? I gave mine away last week. I just, thank you.
was that emailed out, by the way? I have a hard copy too, so I don't need it, but just wondered, was that?
You know, I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I can go
I don't
look.
think so.
I mean,
You know what,
I think I
this
might
is-
have passed them out.
This is, it really is so clear, and it really is helpful. And so, on this business that I was telling Tom that I was advising the
Look at
private
mine.
equity group on,
May I look at
Oh,
it?
sure.
they have a big plan. And I thought what we were gonna be able to do is to see something that had like detail that was like an architect or an engineer drew. And what we had was, we had what looked to be a piece of paper that had been sitting around for a long, actually 2 pages of stuff, sitting around a long time that had sort of a schematic of the plan. But it was kind of like, you know, Christmas paper after Christmas, but it was kind of like this. And someone, you know, took a cell phone picture of it, and it had some notes on it and stuff, and I'm thinking, why would they populate,
Did it have red on it? That might have been me.
you know, this was really just,
I played with, oh, I think I sent that to you when you were in Arizona.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
said, what in the world is this nonsense?
no, this was actually for a, like a professional
This is
business.
from Tom's.
It was
I'm not doing it.
just kind of surprising.
I wonder what our,
10-minute rule?
yeah, it's about right.
That's,
You still got time. Or she,
Well, do you know how many are coming from this?
I don't even know who they are. I should have checked before I
I am
called this morning.
just drawing such a blank on who the second, this is the fourth group, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I can remember the first ones and I can remember the last ones, and just,
The second guy was a little bit late too, so now we're down.
he was
to
just one
two.
guy, right? It was just him
Yeah,
and himself.
Yeah, with David at least.
That was Schultz.
Yeah.
Well, he was,
No, they were here early, because I could hear early. They were taking pictures in the front.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Last,
Yeah, yeah,
Schultz was the ones last week.
Right,
Yeah,
last
last
week,
week. Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, they were
Yeah, they were.
prepared,
This is our last one, by the way.
yeah.
Very
Yeah.
good.
But actually, no, frankly, you found some good ones.
Yeah, they're all,
Wow.
yeah, there's
Wow.
none that I would
They're
toss out.
qualified, and the question is going to be ideas and fit.
Right,
And
right.
They'll be costly part of it, but I don't think they're all going to be wildly different.
I don't know, the last group, at least from my perspective, their process seemed to fit, just dovetail perfectly
Yep.
with our
I think I-
need.
Yeah,
Now,
I wasn't
now,
here, but-
I wondered either they had listened extremely carefully to perhaps the discussion
That's
that
part of it.
they may have had with Tom.
The other
or-
part is,
My
they've
emails
done,
were on
they've
2
all done
o'clock.
enough congregations.
And we had heard from
churches,
them.
That,
Okay.
they probably know what is needed. They probably, you know, we're probably not the first to be,
356 jobs they had, something like 376.
wow.
The ones last time. Wow, Schultz, the two Davids.
Yeah.
Actually, they definitely sounded switched on, and so,
It's interesting though, his philosophy that he wants to be involved in some way in every project, which would seem to put a fairly severe limit in my mind on how big they would ever become, which is pretty interesting.
asking about the listening meetings.
Yeah.
Which I think is good.
Kudos to him for
Yeah.
not wanting to,
All the recommendations were at least 5 years old.
well, yeah, I know.
Average 5.5
Yeah,
years old
yeah.
or something like that, or 7. It was more like 7. I don't know what they've been doing the last 7 years.
Well, I think that's a fair question to ask.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you've gone in to get to that insight, that,
Yeah.
you know, if we decide that we wanna ask for anything in the past 2 years that we can talk to.
Something new.
Yeah, I agree.
We got 2 more minutes.
I got 3:10.
I heard the door open.
Now, the first group did not have, well, maybe these folks were the two people that came, I don't think were partners in the firm, or were they?
They were staff, they were
Staff.
But,
Yeah, you can tell a little bit of a difference, because the others had principals or.
Mhm.
Sort of makes a difference because, you know, if we engage the first, we're gonna have to tell the whole story again, and they'll have to ask us all the same questions about trying to get at what are we really after, because you can't translate that to a staff person and have them expect it. Part of it.
On the other hand, that first group was the ones that did the,
That's right.
did
And
this.
they trained under,
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, no, I'm
yeah,
not
yeah,
saying that's bad,
yeah.
but,
It could be with the others, that's not who you're gonna get either, it could
Yeah.
be
Right.
staff
Yeah.
people that are. And in fact, I think I asked one of those people, but it seemed like this would be a fairly small project since they
You
go.
did?
Yes,
That's
I
how
was
small we
shocked
actually
by the
accepted.
answer.
What was the
Yeah.
number they gave?
75.
7,500?
Or 75,000. It's a
I
small-
thought it was 75,000.
Yeah, yeah.
Jen put down 7,500.
Oh, I think it was 1,000, because,
That's what-
My recollection was it was 7,500 too.
Oh, was it?
That's what I recall. Now, maybe I
Wow.
misheard. I just, and I was stunned. I thought that just,
you can't do anything.
would you get a $700 fee for that?
Right.
It's like
But
you
know
couldn't
what,
even
and
drive out here.
I thought 75,000 was pretty small. You know,
Maybe
for-
that's what, that would still be small, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're not sure now.
Yeah.
Well, and then was it the second guy that said that he went from a staff of 21 down to 7 during the depression,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
recession, or
depression,
whatever
yeah,
we're
yeah.
dealing with?
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah, that's.
I would seem
It
that
was
was
a
tiny.
tough, yeah.
And they could be related people, they could be like relatives and, you know,
yeah.
long-serving employees or something, so you don't know what they had to do.
I just found out today that our vicar that's coming in is related to Ted Diggy.
Ah, really?
Gorman.
Second or third cousin,
Yeah.
once removed, so
Wow. So did Ted even know that we were looking at,
I don't think he knew ahead of time,
Gorman?
but he
Oh.
knew who it was once it was selected.
oh,
He
sure,
had
sure,
his
sure.
grandpa's name or something?
You know, I don't know anymore, he told me, yeah.
It's
I-
it's
he told me, but it was
L-E-H-R-M-A-N, right? Lerman is his name.
Lorman. Marcus Lorman. L-O-H-R-M-A-N.
Lorman, okay.
Well, most of the judgment, I mean, how do you see this going? I would think would be on whatever they bring in for preliminary ideas, rather than these sessions we're having now.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree,
See
because
what the-
all we're doing now is we're trying to be fair and orient them with what our needs are.
Yeah,
And have a dialogue of how they do things and,
Yeah.
you know, how they engage with us and,
Yeah.
but I think it really is up to them to impress us that they are qualified to do it, they want to do it, and they have good ideas.
well, sometimes you can tell what kind of questions they ask.
Or if they're late.
Well, yeah, I think you could have thrown, if there had been one that really wasn't a good fit, I think that would have emerged,
Yeah.
maybe in the initial, so.
Well,
Those
if he went
initial
to the
things,
wrong
I think,
Redeemer.
can help rule people out, but it's hard that it's not enough to rule them in.
Yeah.
Where's the next nearest one?
You've forgotten to, if they didn't call you,
I emailed him at 2:00,
yeah.
So,
confirming, and he had a couple of questions, and I responded. Okay, let's see if I got any emails.
Where's he coming
Downtown.
from?
Well, but
He can call you.
It's a wild card though.
If I were coming from downtown, I'd be taking the train,
yeah,
both ways because of this time of day.
Or for sure, I would have given at least an hour and a half.
oh gosh, yes. No emails.
He's lost. That's what that means.
Yeah.
I just threw away all the records from 1960 and 1970 today.
62, 70, no.
All the, it's just the church record for the Sunday.
Oh,
There's,
attendance
like,
and stuff?
Yeah, not attendance, but what the book hymns are, what the,
I think I see the problem. I had him,
27th.
I had it down for the 20th and he had it down for the 27th. I don't know how
I was
that-
gonna say, if you emailed him at 2, he should have been en route by 2.
Yes,
Well, if it is 27,
It's next week.
yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
it looks like, it looks like that's my error.
that's all right, I think I.
It looks like my error. I'm thinking,
we got stuff to do here anyway.
Wow.
so there.
Tom, I think you owe all of us a beer for this egregious error.
I will, well,
Nobody wants to replace you.
Yeah. It's yeah.
well,
Egregious with one G.
We got job security.
well,
Yes,
okay, as a matter of fact,
Thanks.
after this meeting, I'm going to that new taco restaurant next, and if anybody wants to join me for a beer, I'll buy.
Hey, I've heard it's nothing but good there.
They have very good margaritas, but I don't,
Yes.
but I'm gonna have a beer. But anyway, after this meeting, which is now much shorter than it was otherwise gonna be,
Yeah.
thanks to my
Your grandson.
ineptness. So so it's my error, my error.
I'm gonna be gone
We're not unhappy.
next week.
No, we're not.
Well, so then
We'll Skype you
Got a
in.
shorter
So
day.
then how do we pose the question of, or how do we gather whatever documents may exist? Is that a question for
Pastor
you
Katie,
to take back the council or between you and
Pastor Katie, last week, we were having some discussions about a strategic plan, and she gave me copies of everything that she found. I did not bring them, but I have them.
Okay.
And we were looking at them because there was some discussion about, at the council, about a new vision and a new mission statement for Redeemer. So then that brought up the question of, well, what have we said, done recently? So that brought out the most detailed thing that we had. Well, there was something from like that Pastor Pangborn did, and then there was something from a few years prior to that. But Pastor Pangborn's was more tactical than strategic. It just suggested a lot of things
Yeah.
to do,
Specifics.
very specifics. It wasn't really strategic. So the discussion about vision, mission generated the discussion about strategy. So then I can bring for our next meeting, I can bring copies of that for this group.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But I don't think we're gonna find it.
I don't think
It may,
Yeah.
it'll be helpful. I don't think it's gonna be sort of illuminating.
Yeah.
Right,
It'll
it
be
won't guide
helpful.
us.
I don't think it
Yeah.
will.
I think it's one where council will have to address, do they want to embark on creating a new vision and
Right.
mission? Then it leads to strategy as the next part of that. Then it leads to what specific plans do you want to try to execute in the next 12, 18 months?
Right.
So they should, the thought leaders, whether it's council or there's some other committee formed, they're the ones I think who need to lead
Right.
part of that.
But I think it does then pose a question of,
Are we walking?
are we
the
a
line?
tad premature? And that's not to say that, I'm not suggesting in any way that we would shut down. I think actually there's a fair amount that we could occupy
Right.
ourselves with. But
But I
there will
suppose-
come a point, there would
Right.
come a point, I think that,
And I think, to your very good point, Mark, there will be a coming together of the vectors, because anything we do, once we sort of get to some place where we would even present something to the congregation, would have to be, I think, presented in some strategic context. Because we see this and this, we are recommending this. And then the congregation will have to decide, do they wanna financially support what we're recommending? And
Where, there seem like there are two assumptions, and I could be wrong, and I missed last week's discussion, but.
so did I, so no.
That $700,000 and,
Yeah,
we're fine with the sanctuary, leave that alone. And I don't know, either one of those.
No, I
make too
think,
much
I think we
sense.
opened it up on the sanctuary part and said, first of all, the sanctuary should be part of the plan.
Yeah,
And it may be, in fact, that we execute some elements of that in phase one, but it may
Yeah.
be that there are some elements that are more controversial and will take, you know,
Yeah.
more time in the
Yeah.
congregation. So
That's right,
we
yeah,
said,
phase.
it has to be part of a master plan, and then if we can't fund the whole thing, or we choose to fund certain things, then it would all seem to fit over a period of time.
Yeah.
And the 700 was just sort of a midpoint.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
sort of,
Right.
you know, when we were talking about, you know, what this might be, it might, you know, I think the way it was positioned was it could be $500,000 or $1 million as a master plan.
sure.
And so that, I think, is where the
kind of
salary came out as something
yeah, or
in
more. I wasn't here, but I mean.
Yeah, and the other thing that Katie has used as a reference point is in major building campaigns at many congregations, the rule of thumb is that you can generally raise between 1.5 and 2 times what your annual regular giving is. And so that would kind of put you in that $1 million range, you know. So a lot of, you know, things that are pointing that way, but not, there's maybe nothing specific.
Well, the second guy, sounded like he did some interesting things at a sanctuary up at.
That was Bill Sturm. He was
Sturm
on
was
the-
second, yeah.
Right, in the church in Northfield.
Yeah, he showed some interesting things that he.
Yeah.
Yeah, but-
You know what, actually, and there was another question that occurred to me. And this is really a timeline kind of question. So the timeline we have, the very rough timeline we have laid out.
With the emphasis on rough.
Yeah, that's in no way past. So, but it would have us, I think, by and large, kicking off a capital campaign in a fairly, within not too many weeks of having done the annual pledging and budget for the next year. And my question was, and I have absolutely no point of view on this whatsoever, is would some expert, whoever that might be, say, always if you can control it, always strive to overlap capital campaigns with your annual budgeting, or would they say, never ever try to do that, try to move opposite, which was, and
Yeah.
because that just struck me as, I think, Tom, when you were
Might be
walking
some
through
learning.
the
Yeah,
thing last week, I thought, oh, gee, I wonder.
And I think what I said on it last week, I think I've said it every time, is that this is, you know, an aggressive timeline
Yeah.
that assumes
Yeah.
that we discover nothing unusual, that we don't have unusual pushback from the congregation that requires more time and effort.
Yeah.
You know, so I tend to think that this is too aggressive. It's just trying to put something out in front, and I was kind of hoping that one of the architects would react to it and say, well, the amount of
you're
time
nuts.
you've allocated for this portion of it is probably not reasonable. Because look how 2 of them talked about having a lot of touch points and interaction with us. And to do that, you really can't do that in a week or 2. So that's gonna take some time to have multiple meetings with kind of groups of people and, you know, their interviews and that sort of thing.
But to do that, you have to know what you want.
That's the problem I'm having, is this is not like having 3 bids on having your driveway redone.
No,
Where you, it's a really narrow thing and you can compare the things.
right.
So, I'm struggling with this all vagueness.
Well, to Mark's point, I guess when you were meeting last week, my apologies, but all these things that we're talking about, making the basement, I'm gonna say that a lower level,
Thank you.
more attractive or more habitable for offices or meeting rooms or functions and more. Maybe that's not something that we should even be thinking about, is renewing the lower level. Or, we're in the nave all the time and we're coming in and introducing ourselves to people all the time. There are, and so that renewing Redeemer has kind of two edged sword. It's either something that has some kind of a strategic purpose that we don't really know yet about, that we think we do because we've been members of churches for decades. But there are a number of things that need
No
to be done,
particular agenda,
functionalized.
but we've been catching up on what we think of the last three a little bit.
Well,
Posing a couple extra questions.
yes,
Yeah,
go ahead, Mark.
Well, one was, I was keying off of your comment last week about we really should ask to review whatever passes for a strategic plan.
yeah,
It sounds like you and Tom have had some.
some conversation about this,
And
yeah.
my only comment was, ideally, there's something that's 6 months fresh and it's really buttoned up and it's great, there's nothing whatsoever, and I suspect we're somewhere,
In between,
yeah,
right.
handful of documents that may or may not be really on point that are 5 years old or whatever. But the
Yeah.
point being, we should get our I think we said, let's get our hands on whatever exists, whatever state, and just read through it and see if, does it provide any illumination, or, should we consider, do we need to take a pause and that's something that should be filled in, or is that something we can run in parallel, or do we not care?
Right, and
That's all I
there's a
say.
lot of schools of thought on this one, right, which is one of the reasons is why I've been kind of all over the map with it. Tom and I worked with a small group a few years back to do some sort of interim strategic planning purposes. We worked on the Growing and Engaged Church process, which had some specific projects that we've worked on for the last few years. And I think my general sense in churches is things are fresh for about 3 years. And then you gotta go on to the new thing.
Really?
Yeah, because you don't get the results anymore. And everybody says this about, stewardship campaigns or all of that kind of stuff. You kind of need to rejigger every 3 years or so, or it gets a little bit stale. Now that said, there are lots of different schools of thought currently about strategic planning and how long it should go and what depth it should be in. A bunch of Redeemer members, Mark included, went with me to hear Nadia Boltz-Weber speak. And one of the things that she was very clear about is they've never had a strategic plan, they've never had a mission statement, they're doing just
And
fine,
you're not gonna
thank you.
get her to talk about it,
And
that's for
she
sure.
will not engage in that kind of nonsense.
So like, that's definitely one end of the
Yeah, that's one
spectrum.
end of the spectrum. There are lots of folks, it used to be all in vogue to have 5-year and 10-year plans, and now there's pretty much no one in the church industry that thinks that's a good idea. It's just too long, and things change too much. So, what exactly we can do to talk about what we want and envision for us could take a number of different forms. As I've talked to Tom and we've wrestled with this recently, our best sense is what we would like to do with the parish is probably do some sort of 3-part process. We were aiming at January because, believe it or not, the church calendar gets pretty darn full pretty fast. We're already staring down at Fall Focus coming right around the corner, and that pretty much sucks up all the fall. You can't do anything in late November, early December because Christmas, and we only have a couple weeks in September before we hit that. If we wanted to, we could try to hit some things earlier in September. It's a question of whether there'd be good energy there. That's a possibility, we could talk about that. I was gonna do a couple-part series on Pastor Katie went to Germany and all we got was this lousy blog. But I'd be willing to give that up if we wanted to do something else with that time. And then we could save January for maybe some more in-depth talking about the building. It's just we don't have a whole lot of lead time on that. What we could do, what Tom and I talked about doing, was doing a session on history, where have we been, a session on brainstorming, and a session on prioritization. I think this is something like you may have done with Dennis Brzezinski. Yeah, did you do, and I think you led something like that.
Yeah.
Did you lead it?
Yeah.
What insight do you have from that process, Dick? What was the good and bad and ugly of that?
Well, it caused some resentment because it was too aggressive in terms of objectives. But just thinking about our situation, you don't want to appear to be doing this strategic thing just because we're doing this building
Right.
thing, I mean, you really have to
Yeah, yeah.
put it in the right order, I